Imagine this. The world believes wars begin with anger, with speeches, with missiles, with borders. But history tells a very different story. Wars don't start when leaders shout. They start when energy flows are threatened. Oil. For more than 100 years, oil has quietly decided which war escalates, which conflict ends quickly, and which empire survives pressure. Most people think oil is just fuel. It's not. Oil is economic oxygen. Without it, armies don't move, factories shut down, food prices explode, governments lose control. That's why oil has never been just another commodity. It is leverage. Let's rewind. World War I didn't change because of trenches or generals. It changed when navies shifted from coal to oil. That single decision reshaped global power. World War II wasn't decided only by soldiers and tanks. It was decided by who controlled oil fields, and who didn't. Germany had advanced weapons, but it ran out of fuel. Japan didn't attack Pearl Harbor because of ideology or madness. It attacked because the United States cut off its oil supply. Every modern conflict follows this pattern. Not ideology first, not religion first, energy first. Here's where most people misunderstand oil wars. They think wars are fought to take oil. That thinking is outdated. Modern oil wars are fought to control behavior. Because oil doesn't just power vehicles, it powers food supply chains, electricity grids, transportation, military readiness, social stability. When oil prices rise, food becomes expensive, transport costs jump, inflation spikes, governments lose popularity. That's not accidental. That's pressure. Oil shocks have toppled governments faster than invasions ever did. Now look at today's world. Inflation is already high. Debt is already heavy. Public patience is already thin, which means something dangerous. Oil volatility today is more powerful than ever before. A small disruption now creates a massive reaction. And oil markets don't wait for confirmation. They move on fear, a rumor, a statement, a threat. That's enough. Even a 5% chance of supply disruption can spike prices worldwide. And once prices spike, markets panic. Currencies weaken. Political pressure explodes. This is why oil is the silent weapon of modern geopolitics. Not bombs, not bullets, uncertainty. And this brings us to one country, a country that doesn't need to win a war to shake the global economy. A country that controls fear, not firepower. That country is Iran. And to understand why Iran matters so much, you first need to understand where the world's energy actually moves. To understand why Iran matters so much, you need to look at a place most people have heard of, but very few truly understand. Pull up a world map. Zoom into the Middle East. Between Iran and Oman lies a narrow stretch of water, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't look powerful. No massive cities, no towering skyscrapers, no dramatic landmarks. And yet, nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this single corridor. Every day, tankers carrying oil from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar. All of it must pass through Hormuz. That creates a reality most people miss. If Hormuz is disrupted, even briefly, the global economy feels it instantly. But here's the key detail. Oil doesn't need to stop flowing. It just needs to feel uncertain. Markets don't ask, did oil stop? They ask, could oil stop? And that question alone is enough to create chaos. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Iran does not need to block the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't need to sink ships. It doesn't need to fire missiles. It doesn't need to declare war. It only needs to signal instability, a naval exercise, a warning statement, a drone incident, a seized tanker. That's enough. Insurance rates jump, shipping slows, oil prices spike, currencies weaken, all before a single barrel is lost. This is why Iran has leverage far beyond its economy. North Korea threatens weapons. Iran threatens markets. And markets react faster than militaries. This is also why Iran has always been treated differently than other sanctioned countries. You can sanction Iran. You can isolate Iran. You can pressure Iran. But you cannot ignore Iran. Because ignoring Iran means gambling with global energy stability. Now add timing to geography. Iran today is under intense internal stress. Inflation above 40%, a collapsing currency, food prices rising more than 60%, water shortages, protests across dozens of cities. This creates a dangerous combination. Internal pressure plus external leverage. When a country under stress controls a global choke point, every move becomes risky. Push too hard, and escalation becomes tempting. Pull back too much, and leverage grows. That's why every major power watches Hormuz more closely than battlefields, because war can be contained, oil shocks cannot. And here's a pattern most people miss. Whenever Iran faces internal unrest, Hormuz becomes more volatile. Not because Iran wants war, but because signaling external leverage strengthens internal bargaining power. It sends one clear message to the world. Instability here doesn't stay local. And this brings us to a critical realization. If Iran controls the switch, any strategy to pressure Iran needs insurance, a backup, an alternative source of oil that can calm markets if Hormuz shakes. And that's where the story suddenly shifts continents, because the next piece of this puzzle is not in the Middle East, it's in South America. For years, Venezuela looked like a finished story. A collapsed economy, empty shelves, a sanctioned government, political chaos. To most of the world, Venezuela felt irrelevant. But geopolitics doesn't care about finished stories. It cares about utility, and Venezuela has something no other country on earth has. The largest proven oil reserves in the world. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than Iran. The oil was never gone. It was just trapped. Trapped behind sanctions. Trapped behind mismanagement. Trapped behind political paralysis. And that made Venezuela perfect. Because if Iran controls the risk, you need a buffer. Something that can absorb shock when oil markets panic. That buffer is Venezuela. Here's the part most people miss. Modern oil wars aren't fought to take oil. They're fought to calm or scare markets. When pressure increases on Iran, markets immediately price in risk. Prices jump. Inflation reacts. Governments feel heat at home. So before you tighten pressure on a choke point like Hormuz, you secure alternative supply. That's strategy. This is why Venezuela quietly re-entered the conversation, not through dramatic speeches, not through Congress, not through headlines, but through energy channels, oil companies, refineries, shipping insurers, private contracts. Because governments talk in public, markets move in private. When pressure increased on Venezuela, it didn't feel shocking. It felt procedural. Routine sanctions, routine statements, routine negotiations. And that was the signal. Because when something big feels routine, it means the system is testing tolerance. How much pressure can be applied before markets revolt, before allies push back, before escalation becomes unavoidable? The answer came quickly. Oil prices moved, but didn't explode. Currencies shifted, but didn't collapse. Politically, silence. No emergency summits, no coordinated outrage, no red lines. That silence mattered. Because in geopolitics, silence is feedback, and the feedback was clear. The system could absorb more pressure, which meant something dangerous. The first move worked. Venezuela was never about regime change. It was about stress testing the system. If oil markets could stay stable while Venezuela was pressured, then the world had room to push elsewhere. And there was only one place that truly mattered next. Iran. Think of it like this. Iran controls disruption. Venezuela controls supply. Iran threatens chaos. Venezuela calms markets. This isn't conspiracy, it's structure. Before you pressure a choke point, you secure alternatives. Before confrontation, you stabilize supply. Before headlines explode, the groundwork is already laid. That's why analysts stopped asking, why Venezuela now? And started asking, what comes after Venezuela? Because Venezuela wasn't the destination, it was preparation. And once preparation is complete, the system doesn't move loudly, it moves decisively. Quiet contracts, adjusted shipping routes, recalibrated reserves. By the time the public notices, the board is already set. And now the pressure returns to the same question. What happens when internal stress and external leverage collide at the same time? For years, Iran survived pressure through endurance. Sanctions came, people adjusted, the system bent, but didn't break. That phase is over. Today, Iran isn't just under pressure, it's under compression. And compression is far more dangerous than pressure. Let's start inside the country. Iran's currency didn't weaken gradually, it collapsed in steps. From around 440,000 rials per dollar to well over 1.4 million on the black market. That's not normal inflation. That's confidence failure. When people stop believing tomorrow will be stable, behavior changes instantly. Savings disappear. Money is converted immediately. Goods are hoarded. Trust evaporates. That's why food prices didn't rise slowly. They jumped 60 to 70% or more. And when survival costs explode, protests stop being political. They become existential. People don't protest ideology. They protest hunger. Now, here's the shift most headlines ignore. These protests are no longer isolated. Students are involved. Working class families are involved. And most importantly, bazaar merchants are involved. Historically, the bazaar class was Iran's stabilizer. Not radicals, not revolutionaries, pragmatic traders. When the bazaar stays neutral, regimes survive. When the bazaar disengages, through strikes, closures, silent non-cooperation, systems shake. This isn't new. It happened in Iran, 1979, Russia, 1917, Eastern Europe, late 1980s. The middle economic layer stops participating, not violently, not loudly, decisively. Now add demographics. Iran has a young, educated, connected population, online, globally aware, and increasingly disconnected from the ideology ruling them. Listen to the slogans, neither Gaza nor Lebanon. My life for Iran. That sentence explains everything. It's not anti-foreign, it's anti-sacrifice without return. People aren't rejecting identity, they're rejecting cost without benefit. And this is where compression becomes dangerous. Because when internal legitimacy weakens, every external move hits harder. Sanctions bite deeper, threats land stronger, mistakes escalate faster. Now add the final layer. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 20% of global oil supply passes through that narrow corridor, which means Iran doesn't need to fire a missile to shake the world. It only needs to signal instability, and markets react to probability, not confirmation. A naval drill, a seized tanker, a drone sighting, a warning statement. Each one raises risk, each one pushes prices. And this creates a decision trap. If Iran cracks down harder internally, international pressure escalates. If Iran holds back, unrest spreads. If Iran compromises, authority weakens. There is no clean move. Every option creates a new problem. This is why external actors don't need invasion, they need timing. Internal stress plus external leverage does the work for them. History shows this again and again. Regimes rarely fall from outside. They unravel from within, when fear is overtaken by despair. And once despair crosses that line, repression stops stabilizing the system. It accelerates collapse. This is the phase Iran is approaching now. Not collapse, compression. And compressed systems don't break loudly. They snap suddenly. Here's the phase that scares strategists more than open war. Not invasion, not speeches, not declarations, miscalculation. Most major wars in history did not begin because leaders wanted war. They began because systems under pressure made one move too far. And right now, the global system is tight. When economies are stable, diplomacy absorbs shocks. When institutions are trusted, mistakes can be corrected. And when buffers exist, leaders have time. But when pressure compresses from every side, small actions create outsized reactions. That's where the world is now. This is not a war phase, it's a signal-heavy phase. Every move is meant to communicate something. Strength, restraint, warning, deterrence. But signals can be misread. A naval drill becomes intimidation. A sanction becomes provocation. A proxy attack becomes escalation. No one plans the chain reaction. It unfolds. History is brutally clear about this. World War I didn't start because Europe wanted total war. It started because alliances, mobilization schedules, and misread intentions collided. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't nearly end the world because either side wanted nuclear war, but because reaction time shrank to minutes. When decision windows narrow, errors multiply. Now look at Iran's environment today. Internally, legitimacy is strained, economic pain is widespread, public patience is thin. Externally, pressure is persistent, signaling is constant, surveillance is intense. This combination creates risk, not aggression. Because when internal legitimacy weakens, leaders often look outward, not to conquer, but to redirect pressure. External tension can unify fractured populations, justify emergency controls, delay internal reckoning. That's why regimes under stress often flirt with escalation, not because it's smart, because options are disappearing. Now add the external players. The US signals restraint but readiness. Israel signals capability but ambiguity. Regional powers hedge quietly. This creates what analysts call a crowded signaling environment. Too many messages, too little clarity. In such environments, miscalculation doesn't come from aggression. It comes from assumption, assuming the other side will stop, assuming retaliation will stay limited, assuming a signal will be understood as a signal. That's how proxy conflicts expand. A drone strike meant as pressure becomes retaliation. A cyber attack meant as warning becomes escalation. A blockade threat becomes market panic. And once markets panic, politics follows. Oil spikes, inflation reacts, public anger rises. Leaders then face a second layer of pressure at home. And this is where systems tip, because now decisions are made under economic stress, political scrutiny, time pressure, incomplete information. That's the recipe for unintended conflict. Here's the key insight most headlines miss. Miscalculation is more likely than intention. No one needs to want war for war to begin. They just need to lose control of the sequence. That's why current rhetoric sounds cautious but firm. Why actions feel incremental, not decisive. Why escalation looks like drift, not explosion. The world isn't standing on the edge of war. It's standing on the edge of error. And historically, error has been far more dangerous than ideology. Subscribe.